In 2008, Konami created their own Japanese exclusive radio broadcast online called Konami Station. While it would only last a year, one of the main and most interesting programs featured was Akumajō Dracula, radio chronicle produced by Koji Igarashi and the Castlevania crew at the time. This series lasted 13 volumes discussing the franchise and other topics, although details on the specific conversations had are scarce. It featured Japanese voice actors as special guests, that'll be important in a bit, but this series was mainly a precursor to the topic of today's video. While Radio Chronicle was going on, the voice actors featured on the program would each play a character from Castlevania for this new project, and in August of 2008, we would finally see or hear this special feature.
Akumajō Dracula X 追憶の野草曲
Castlevania Nocturne of Recollection, also translated as Nocturne of Reminiscence, is a canon radio drama acting as a sequel to Symphony of the Night. It aired as special segments for the aforementioned Radio Chronicle, with the entire program later being sold physically in Japan in 2010. It would go on for 6 volumes, with each one being around 10-ish minutes. Something really interesting to note is the physical release created a 7th volume for the drama concluding the story, acting as a short epilogue. In the lore, it takes place about a year after the game, featuring all our main heroes like Alucard, Maria Renard, and Richter Belmont. Being a sequel, it does require the context of Symphony of the Night, specifically the true ending of the game to know how everyone got here. But the beginning of this drama does recap those events and even Rondo of Blood using these new voice actors. It's actually pretty cool. Of course, being such a different type of medium compared to video games, this was all presented through sound. As a radio drama, Nocturne of Recollection has such a unique vibe compared to anything else in the entire Castlevania series. Listening to these Japanese voice actors over music from Symphony of the Night, all while reading unofficial fan translations through uploads on YouTube, with the presentation of those being simple but effective. My mind had to constantly create dark, aesthetic scenes in line with imagery from the games, like Ayami Kojima's art, almost like I was reading a novel. It reminded me of when I dove myself into Record Hounds of the God's Abyss for that video, but unlike it, I didn't have to create these voices in my head to see these scenes vividly, which is weird because I actually enjoy doing that for books I read. But no, the voice actors make this entire production come to life in a way only this presentation style could. I never experienced a radio drama before this one. I'm only 19. That type of content has just never been near me, like, at all. But Castlevania is literally one of my favorite pieces of media. I'm gonna go out of my way to experience all of it. So creating the story in my octopilial cortex while listening to these new portrayals of iconic established characters was a super unique experience from that alone. Of course, in retrospect, I think 99% of people would have preferred this story to be a manga, a little animated OVA, or even a game. But I don't know, I don't really mind this story presented as a radio drama. It was specifically created for this medium, and I think it lends a lot of distinctive charm to experience it in its entirety. Obviously, this isn't going to be for everyone, but if you're a fan of the series, especially if you have an attachment to those characters from Symphony of the Night, Nocturne of Recollection is what you're looking for. 1 year has passed since Alucard was forced to vanquish his father, Dracula, once again. The Dampier had intended his mission in Castlevania to be his last, convinced his blood was cursed and his life a tragedy. However, fate would intervene in the form of Maria Renard. She would follow Alucard after the castle had crumbled and stayed with him in an attempt to save him from himself. While the two would travel and live together after, Alucard's guilt wouldn't go away so easily. Haunted by his actions and memories of the past, he would distance himself from everyone, including Maria, never really opening up to her. Despite this, she always stayed by his side and believed he can come out of that darkness one day. While shopping in the nearby town to prove to Alucard and his familiar that she could cook, she received a letter from her distant relative and friend, Richter Belmont. In it, Richter informed her he had been hired to hunt down a vampire that had been causing rampant killings more and more frequently, even where Maria and Alucard lived. Although Richter didn't suspect Alucard as the killer, he couldn't rule out the possibility, and told Maria to contact him if anything strange happened. She was doubtful Alucard was capable of something so horrific, and rushed to tell him of the letter. But then, she sensed a demonic presence lurking close. a male succubus, Magnus the Incubus, flew down from the dark sky, making himself known to taunt Maria. She immediately suspected this demon was the one behind the killings, but Magnus quickly made it clear he knew much more than he should. Alucard's true name, his betrayal of Dracula, even his haunted past where he killed humans, claiming he saw it with his own eyes. Maria was in disbelief, with Magnus even suggesting Alucard was going to feast on her blood next, and because of how distant he had been towards her, she began to question if he was capable of this. Maria summoned the Phoenix of the four celestial beasts to drive Magnus away, with the Incubus laughing maniacally, promising to meet her again. Maria confronted Alucard about Magnus's claims of him feeding on human blood, to which Alucard regrettably told the truth, confessing to her he indeed did 350 years ago.
忘れられるはずがない。俺はあれほど忌み嫌ってきた人の血を吸うという行為を行ったのだ。嘘ではない。
あなたはドラキュラとは違う。1年前、あなたは実の父親であるドラキュラ伯爵を葬った。それはあなたが人を深く愛していたから。そうでしょ。ねえ、嘘だと言ってアルカード、あなたがそんなことするはず。アルカード。よろしいのですか、ご主人様。
マリアを欺くことはできない。どうするかは彼女が決める。今はマグヌスを見つけ出すのが先決だ。
はっ。アルカード、なぜ否定してくれないの。
Alucard with his familiar set out to find Magnus, which didn't take long. He did know Magnus hundreds of years ago, and just like him, the demon had slept for centuries, finally waking up to torment Alucard for betraying Dracula. The two fought, but Magnus's magic was too powerful, showing Alucard the worst moments of his life over and over again. He barely managed to escape the nightmares. Magnus flew away, promising to make him feel nostalgic once again. Maria, meanwhile, searched for Alucard and ran into two incompetent vampire hunters abusing the power of a dark potion. Sensing its evil energy, she destroyed it, the magic then revealing its true form. A dark cloud coming from the potion enveloped Maria and cut off her powers to talk with the celestial beasts. Richter had arrived on the scene just in time to save her, bringing her to recover. Although the two vampire hunters had no ill intention, the leader Cyril had been manipulated by Magnus through his dreams to create the dark potion. With the killing still continuing every day, Alucard and Richter set off to a ruined chapel to confront Magnus, with Cyril tagging along to the annoyance of Richter. There, they finally found the vampire they were looking for. Ludmil, Alucard's servant hundreds of years ago, and the person he was manipulated into turning into a vampire, stood in the ruined chapel, controlled by Magnus, similarly to Shaft controlling Richter 1 year before. Magnus now revealed his whole plan to the party, cutting off Maria's powers, using Ludmil to antagonize Alucard, all in an attempt to bring the damper to his primal vampire instincts. He wanted to turn Alucard into a raging monster, just like his father Dracula, and now forcing his nightmare magic across the party, he was close to succeeding. Suddenly, Maria came to the ruined chapel, protecting Alucard from Magnus's spell. As Richter held off Ludmil and an army of bats, Maria took the nightmare magic without her powers. It was here she realized her resolve. Determined to save Alucard and their friends, she started glowing. Her powers came back, and everyone started fighting Magnus, even Ludmil, whose true soul had awakened, free of the incubus's control. It was then Cyril yelled at Richter to destroy the demon claws, the source of his hellish powers, to finally stop his onslaught. Richter, using the vampire killer, destroyed his claws, then tagged in Alucard to show off, defeating him and burning the incubus until there was nothing left, the demon laughing all the way through. It was finally over. Ludmil and Alucard finally got the chance to say goodbye, ashamed of what he had become, but glad to finally regain his human soul as he died in Alucard's arms. The party made their way outside the chapel, sun rising and flowers blooming. Richter bid Alucard and Maria farewell, making sure she was fine with him and letting them know they can call if anything happens. The two other vampire hunters, Cyril and Alexis, challenge Richter to a battle one day when they're stronger to see who's the better hunter and ride off never to be seen again. Alucard and Maria reflect on the journey, both of them having gone through so much in the past few days. Alucard asks Maria why she decided to stay with him again, to which she responds with wanting to be a pillar of light in his life. Alucard then finally opens up to her, seemingly genuinely happy for the first time in centuries. Alucard is once again the protagonist of the story, with the characters in conflict all surrounding him. When we last saw the Dampier, he was in a terrible state mentally, to be honest, having just killed his father for the second time. Alucard is once again convinced the world doesn't need him because of his cursed blood. He kinda hates himself, and this is evident all throughout the game. Two of the manga I covered last time present this front and center, as I said in the video, and we can even see that at the end of Castlevania 3. He's not in a good place, and hasn't been for a long time. But surprisingly, this is a story that deals with it. Alucard's internal conflict is shown to us through his relationship with two characters, one representing his past, and the other, maybe, his future. The anchor to his haunted history is represented by the new character Ludmil, who knew Alucard and his mother before Dracula had turned completely evil. Well, less evil anyway. In contrast to Ludmil is Maria Renard, a constant beacon of hope for his future after the events of the game. As shown in that ending, Alucard was set on disappearing from the face of the world forever, and after talking with Richter, she set out after him to make sure he didn't. Now, 1 year later, we finally see she actually succeeded, but things are certainly not ideal. Alucard is now extremely depressed, isolating himself from the world, and even though he's now living with Maria, he just treats her as an annoyance. As shown in the game, and later in the story if you saw the overview, he actually does care about her, but he certainly doesn't show it in the beginning. Maria admires him and wants Alucard to finally open up to her, but he constantly refuses. Even though she essentially saved him from himself and wants to see him come out of that darkness, Alucard is still distant towards her and pretty much everyone. It's not until strange killings by a vampire start happening that their bond is tested. Of course, this radio drama has many other core characters, with most everyone introduced playing an important part to the overall narrative. Richter's back and he's as badass as usual. More of a passive role this time around compared to Rondo and Symphony, but he's there for Maria and Alucard, as well as the final confrontation with our big bad, as a Belmont said. This is the last time we see him in canon, so it's interesting looking at his character from that perspective. Richter and the Belmonts are now legends, revered by vampire hunters and just about everyone. The vampire killer whip is instantly recognizable, and Richter himself is confident and assertive. He is a seasoned warrior now. He's been through it all, and this drama presents him as the best of the best. One thing that bothered me a little is Richter isn't dealing with his shame of being controlled and manipulated by Shaft. Of course, I'm nitpicking. This isn't Richter's story, but Portrait of Ruin established him passing down the legendary whip to the Morris clan and disappearing to presumably live his own life, not ruling out the possibility that could have just happened after this drama. It 96% most likely did. It's just a little weird these writers completely disregarded that entire aspect of his character to have him show up here. Not a big deal by any means. Richter is still Richter, but it should be kept in mind. It definitely stood out to me. Cyril and Alexis are two new characters introduced as the other vampire hunters, although they're both pretty inexperienced compared to our trio from the games. Cyril specifically gets a decent amount of development, with the backstory of his sister not only tying into the themes of the story, but being compelling and pushing the conflict with our big bad to the forefront. That big bad being Magnus the Incubus. The presentation of this demon is great. I'm gonna go over the voice acting in a bit, but it really makes his character stand out so much. He's so antagonistic and evil to our main characters in a way the game series has never really shown us. Certainly not to this extent, and it makes him stand out as one of the most memorable parts. Anyway, although straightforward and not with too much depth, Magnus definitely delivers as a solid antagonist for this drama, and a super entertaining one because of the performance given. Speaking of which, these voice actors, man, oh my goodness. Every Japanese voice actor is recast from the games. Unfortunately, character performances in the series are changed quite a lot, with some exceptions, but Castlevania voice actors could be a whole video itself. I say this because it would have been so fitting to have the cast of Symphony of the Night reprise their roles here, being a direct sequel and all, but of course being made years later, I don't know if it would have even been feasible or preferable. Some voice actors like Ryotaro Okuyasu, who played Alucard in the original game, would come back to play the character again for the Sorrow games, Smash Bros., even Orlok in Bloodstained, just as an example, so I think it would have been possible for some to come back. But I guess that's just not the direction they wanted for this project. With that being said, and with the style of storytelling, the voice actors are extremely important in making this come to fruition, which is why I'm highlighting this aspect as much as I am. For starters, Alucard here is voiced by Miyano Mamoru, who is most known for Light freaking Yagami of Death Note fame. I saw the English dub first, so I'm biased towards Brad Swale's insane performance. But back to Akumajō Dracula X, I think he does a really good job with Alucard and goes off for some scenes. Even in the quieter moments though, I still got the sense of that weight he carries.
ミール、お前なのか。
こいつも知り合いか。
あ、かつて俺に仕えていた人間だ。だが
Richter's voice actor is really good as well, played by Shinichiro Miki, who, fun fact, hosted all of Radio Chronicle.
滅びよ！ここはお前の住む世界ではない。
He's a really good Richter Belmont. I kinda wish he played the character again. Something pretty interesting to note is he actually voices Alucard in the Japanese dub of the animated series. I would have never suspected that. But as I said before, Magnus man, so much Dio Brando energy.
顔色が悪いぞマリア。お前は心のどこかでアルカードを恐れている。信じられぬのなら見せてやろう。これが奴の本性だ。
The only two performances I didn't like were for pretty simple reasons that don't really have to do with the voice actors themselves. The Imp, one of Alucard's familiars, doesn't really add much to the story, only really talking when Alucard won't, and when he does, he's written kind of annoying in my opinion.
こんなの。おい女、訂正しろ。ねえアルカード、何か食べたいものはある？貴様、いい加減にしろ。そのようなことをいちいち尋ねるな。うるさいわね。そのくらいはいいじゃない。それに、お前の料理を食って腹でも壊したらどうするつもりだ。
そうだな。
It certainly suits the Imp, don't get me wrong, I know that's what they're going for, but I don't know, it's just not for me. The other I was talking about has to do more with a complete tonal shift in character, that being Maria Renard. She acts completely differently compared to Symphony of the Night, and while it's mostly a writing thing, this is emphasized in her performance. Let's compare her voice and demeanor in the game to this radio drama, and remember this is supposed to be a year later.
闇の力を持ってるわね。見たところ人間のようだけど、この城に来た目的は何？私と同じね。その言葉信じてあげるわ。私マリア、あなたは無愛想なのね。まあいいわ。生きてたらまた会いましょう。それじゃ失礼。
まあ、かわいいお花。よく見るとあちこちにたくさん咲いてるのね。気をつけないと踏んでしまいそうな小さな花だけど、寄り添って咲いているのがとっても綺麗ね。アルカード、あなたもよ。そうでしょ。この花少し摘んで帰ろうかしら。すごく綺麗だから、あの廃墟も少しは明るくなると思うの。
They're like two different characters. I wasn't really a fan of the direction they took Maria in, or the higher pitched voice. It's such a departure compared to who she was, and while she has good moments and scenes where Maria acts like Maria, it really wasn't consistent across the 7 volumes. Even with those minor gripes, however, the performances and characterization are still really good across the board, and I want to emphasize how important that is for an online radio drama. It's such a strange niche part of Castlevania history that has always fascinated me. Japan always gets the good stuff, man. While certainly not a life-changing story, I think it's still really good and such a special side adventure with these characters for fans of the series actually dealing with aspects set up in the game. Specifically with Alucard, that Symphony ending always left room for interpretation. I remember when I beat the game for the first time, genuinely wondering what would happen to Alucard and Maria after, hardly knowing what I do now. After all, the next time we see him is in the Demon Castle War, baby! Oh, definitely a real game. Isn't that right, Julius? Oh yeah, baby. By the way, the fan game looks really good. Woo! Hype as hell. No, seriously. The next time we see him is in the Sorrow games hundreds of years later. Still stoic as always, but it's a huge departure. Mentally in Symphony of the Night, Alucard is still a kid, most likely around 17 or 18, having been sleeping for 300-ish years after Castlevania 3. It's an aspect of him that has never really been delved into, and I think this radio drama deals with his dark past, his isolating present, and his hopeful future more so than any other piece of Castlevania media really well. Besides that, there are definitely a few questions the story brings to the forefront for those keeping up with the lore. Like, how long were Alucard and Maria together after, and did they hook up leading to the Alucard bloodline? Hey man, I know in my first ever video I said I wasn't the shipper type, but fuck it. I ship Alucard and Maria, and no one can stop me. No, jokes aside, I am curious what happened to them after, although we probably will never find out, and leaving it to our imagination may be the most interesting outcome. Another one, as I said before, when did Richter give the vampire killer to the Morse clan, and how long would he have been a vampire hunter after this? Probably not something the writers were thinking about, but with this being canon and all, it is a little weird. In the grand scheme of the Castlevania series, while not an absolutely necessary part of the overall century-hopping narrative, Nocturne of Recollection is a fun story giving context to established characters through a unique presentation style. While never being officially translated for fans outside of Japan, there are now a good amount of fan-made translations widely available, making this unappreciated part of Castlevania history something we can experience firsthand. I'll have the most popular translation in the description. It's pretty good, and I do recommend listening to this original audio. By making this video, I hope to spread the word on this cool Castlevania story for fans who are going to appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing. But as per usual, I hope you got something out of your time here. As a great man once said, take care of yourselves, and of course, as usual, have yourself a damn good one. Take care, guys.
I have absolute control.
Well, I really don't give a damn.